Logistics.
Going down. Now it's going up. All right. Hey, welcome everybody back to Sustainaics. I'm Mike Vincent. I'm a Sustainaics, and I was s- traveling through Italy in the cyber web or something, and I ran into Derek Pitts. Actually, that's not true. I was stalking cool people on LinkedIn and ran into Farm.One. I saw Farm.One and read what you're doing, Derek, and reached out. Thanks for being on the show, my friend. Even all the way from Italy.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. You know, with Zoom and everything, it feels so not so long distance, but it is.
It's really strange. It's still light out there. Well, you're
You're
what,
welcome.
5 6 hours ahead of us? Is that right?
6 hours from New York. Yeah, that's right.
6 hours from New
Yeah,
York. Okay,
yeah,
so it's not that. Yeah, all right. So, anyways, you're getting into your evening. Thanks for letting me invade your your
no problem.
your vacation. Like most guests, you're like, "Are we recording today?" I'm like, "Yeah, I
Yeah.
do it just like this." There's just it's the best way. You can't prepare, right? I mean, it's better this way.
No need to
But
prepare.
look,
Live, eat, and breathe the business. So we're good.
yeah, absolutely, my friend. I mean, and that's what it takes, right, to
Hmm.
to to do these things. And I love what you're doing here. I'm really interested in both. I saw the Farm.One, right, and
Yeah.
um, I saw the vertical farming, but then kind of, and I've talked to people doing vertical farming, and not that it's like old hat or mundane. It's really cool stuff, and people do it different ways. But the way you guys are engaging with commerce and monetizing it is different than anything I've seen before. I mean, I've seen people supplying and trying to sell, and some not even being able to do that yet. They're still proving out certain concepts with aeroponics and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and drip irrigation and that type of thing. But you guys, tell us what tell us what you're doing there, Farm.One. It's really cool.
Well, where I'll sort of start where we are, and then we can sort of back into how we ended up here, right?
Yeah,
And sort of
exactly,
my
absolutely.
philosophical approach and my belief, right? So, what do we do today? We're what I would call a culinary vertical farm or sort of a micro farm, although we're not terribly small. We have a 10,000 square foot building. Inside that building, we have a
Yeah,
2,000 square foot grow room allocation, and so 10-foot ceilings. So we have like 6 racks that are 32 feet long, 10 feet high, across the room. And in that room, we grow hundreds of varieties at the same time of, what I call hard to source, sort of rare greens, but they basically cut across the microgreens, edible flowers, specialty leaves, and some herbs. But it's mainly for the restaurant set, fine dining in particular, given
yeah.
the wide variety, less so for consumers, and we can talk about that at the moment. But for the farming part, it's clearly geared towards creating high margin, high end greens. And we deliver by electric bike to restaurants in New York City, right? We don't ship. We do super sustainable delivery. We harvest and we'll send it to you the same day. You can call us in the morning and get your delivery that afternoon for evening service. And it goes right from our container right to a dinner plate. There's no processing a restaurant has to do with it. And so that's the farm part. And from that, we hang other consumer elements from it. 'Cause, consumers just aren't really prepared to do what we would need them to do, to buy the greens at the price that it costs us to make it in the expensive zip code that we make it in, right? But we find
Mm,
other ways that consumers love engaging with the farm. First, we do obviously a lot of tours, right? It's very digestible space, very digestible building. We have a rack dedicated to tasting, and we wow and surprise people just introducing them to the concept of farming. We put in a brewery,
yeah.
right? And a tap room and cocktail bar and event space all around the farm. It's totally integrated and you're ensconced in the vertical farm, which is a jaw-dropping spectacle to see. And it sort of mixes sort of high-tech, chic industrial and other elements. And so we actually brew about half our beers, what we call farm forward, meaning we brew um, craft beer that's never been brewed before with products that only we grow, right? Because it's right there on the farm. And so you can get some
Oh, no
very,
kidding.
very, yeah, interesting profiles. And our brewery is sized and designed, it's a microbrewery to produce only as much beer as we can sell in our tap room. We're not doing distribution, right? We're not chasing anything.
Oh,
There's nothing mass about our
that
business,
was my
right?
next question. That
Yeah,
was my next
no,
question. I'm a beer
no.
snob, so it's like, how do I get a hold of this stuff?
Yeah, and so you basically have to come to our place, right? We do a limited
Well,
can distribution to some local friends, right, in terms of places that we think help us with marketing. But if you really
yeah,
want our stuff, you got to come to our place. And then we also, and then what we do with the tap room and cocktail bar, which we call the brew lab, right? That's the moniker we've given this piece of the business. We have a
yeah.
very, very active and engaging events business, right? Where we make our space available to a lot of different types of groups, both big and small, both sustainability related, not sustainability related. You want to do a wedding? Do you want to do a reception? You want to have a birthday party? You want to do a kids party? You want to do a baby shower? You want to do whatever you want to do, all the way up to private dinners for some of the biggest brands you've heard from, private tours, all these different elements. And we mix that with programming, right? With, music events, comedy events, some of these specialty groups that like to have, spaces where they can fit 100 people to do, like a reading rhythms or written in Brooklyn, which is a storytelling series that we do a lot of, right? We
Yeah,
create a space
gotcha.
that people can come and spend some real time without necessarily charging people to use the venue, because we offer the bar and people can come in, see the farm, have food, have cocktails. We have a pop-up residency where we provide food on a rotating basis. And so it's very chef focused, culinary focused, with a consumer wrapper, where we deliver the benefits of the farm, sort of in an environment where people are way more open to accessing it and understand it and experience it in ways they've never thought possible. And that's how we hook them.
Gotcha. And so, the I mean, we can get into the philosophy. Let's get into the
Yeah,
philosophy and
yeah,
so and how you got into this. Maybe not
yeah,
from birth or anything like that, but
no,
I mean, it interests me because one of the things that interests me about this is it's like an educational or I want to say an inspirational type of coffee house almost, right? Like
yeah,
it's like Starbucks, but you're going there and you're not just eating or drinking bitter over roasted coffee. You're actually
right,
learning something about sustainability, and you're getting a culinary experience about all these different, like you said, these specialty leaves and edible flowers and stuff. And I only got through like a page and a half of the different leaves and things like that when I was
right.
looking at your website, because
That's all you
it's
need.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
The only one I disagree with is anise. I hate anise.
Oh, yeah,
And I know you're in Italy, so that's kind of maybe offensive right now
yeah.
because you're there. But pizzelles and anise, they don't agree. Licorice is not my thing. It's just not my thing. But yeah, go ahead. What is
Yeah.
the philosophy behind it? I get it, the community and going in. I get the feeling I could walk in there with with my Martin and sit down and just start playing it sometime, and it would be just cool.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I know exactly how to sort of frame the philosophical piece, so I think people can get their arms
Yeah.
around it. Before I do that, though, we did recently brew an anise hyssop dark lager, which literally tastes like root beer, which is very amazing and actually sells pretty well.
No, okay.
But
So
yeah, yeah,
I'm not opposed to anise in a recipe,
yeah,
but
yeah.
like an anise cookie, I can't
Oh
handle it.
yeah, no, it's beer,
Yeah,
but it's
no.
subtle, and we make some specialty ice cream on the farm, vanilla ice cream, also with sometimes some honey. If you put it in the dark lager, it also makes a great dessert that we offer. And so
Oh
it's
man,
very
how
it's a
fantastic!
great way to experience it. This house up, which is grown about 5 feet from where you can watch it being harvested and utilized. It's pretty amazing. So
Oh, that's awesome.
so there's
So
two
next
there's
time I'm near Brooklyn, I'm going
you
over
got to
for
come,
sure.
right? So there's
Absolutely.
there's two sort of anchor points I think I'll provide you relative to understanding a philosophical approach which drives everything, right? Um,
Yeah.
Number one, if you believe in sort of the future and the promise of urban agriculture, right?
Yeah.
Its ability,
Hmm.
its some way, shape, or form, and some advancement of technology over some period of time, pick your window of time. If you believe that this has the potential to be at least one piece of the overall agricultural solution that the world needs for
Hmm.
urban centers, right? Then finding a way, right, to be able to plant your flag and survive long enough and be relevant long enough to be able to provide value to enough people where you can start to really make some money. And then once you're rooted, then you can sort of continue to grow from there. And then over some long time period, the idea is that we've infected every urban area with the base technology that we do, but we're doing it in a way that provides real value to people, real economic benefits in a way that's real accessible and easy to do, right? So if you latch onto that as, okay, that sounds like interesting. Nobody knows exactly how we'll get there yet, but I think a lot of people connect with the fact that whatever that is, that's entirely possible. And yeah, let's start working towards that, right? So that's sort of anchor
Mm,
point number one.
yeah.
Anchor point number
Yeah.
two, which is probably largely a result of sort of my background and what I've done for most of my career and how I ended up here, right? If I have a location that's got four walls and I have a farm in it, right? A lot of my background is retail, right? So I have a retail box, and
Right.
I'm more comfortable, right, in a retail environment where I'm making cash flow, not losing money, right? I'm sort of the
Yeah.
antithesis of the VC. I'll fund your losses until we get enough eyeballs to make enough money, right? That's not like my reason for existence, although I know it works for a lot of other models and a lot of other folks. Our view is, okay, how do we package our version of vertical farming in a way where it can be super relevant to enough people today, where we can have a fair value exchange? They're getting something great, right? We're providing something great. They're happy, we're happy, and we can be profitable, right? And what we
Mm-hmm.
found, right, is that vertical farming and our version of vertical farming, right? 2,000 square foot room. It's not the 100,000 square foot big farms as you've heard about, right? That have all struggled and
Yeah.
most of them have gone away, right? Um, it's
Right.
a 2,000 square foot room. You can see corner to corner of our 10,000 square foot space, right? So we're fully transparent. It lit up beautifully. It's a stacked benches flood and drain system, right? So not like hanging aeroponics or anything like that, right? So you look and we
I
have
got
just
you.
bench upon bench upon bench, floor to ceiling, 30 feet, just colorful, green, large plants, small plants, right? And we have what we call a display rack, one of the racks right inside our tap room as along one of the walls. So when you walk along the street and you look in the garage door, because we're in residential central, right in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn, you look in, it's just jaw dropping and people just can't not come in. And when they come in, the whole space is amazing because it's very verdant, it's welcoming, it's cool, it's sort of
Yeah.
serene at the same time. There's a lot, just people just love being around the plants. But when you see that, we found that it creates what I call a culture of participation, right? People just want to be around it. And then there's all kinds of ways they can participate. The old model was, I got to be able to sell you sort of a microgreen you don't know how to use, or an edible flower you've never seen, or a baby green at a price you can't afford, right? That was the old model, right? To try and get people to do something. And
Right.
people just aren't going to do that. But if they come in and hang out in the space, they attend the great comedy event, they drink beer they love, we infuse our cocktails, right, with special flavors from the farm that no one else has, right? So we make some of the most interesting, truly botanical cocktails that you could have. And everything
Yeah.
you get with us, whether it's a beer or a regular cocktail, you can get an NA version as well. So we're super inclusive, right? All across the
Yeah.
full spectrum. And so we basically turn it into uh, it's
Uh-oh. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Check your mic. You got muted. On the bottom of the screen, you should be able to
yeah.
click here. Click it again. Click it again. Click it again. Because I just tried. There we go.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No,
Sorry
no
about that,
problem.
folks. That was me. I tried to click. I had to cough, so I clicked the button to cough, but I
Oh, you
clicked the
shut us
wrong
off.
one, and I muted you instead of me.
That is no
Don't worry,
problem.
folks.
So
Don't worry,
we're
folks. I am a professional.
so hey, the technology is beautiful until it's not, but then it's always beautiful.
Exactly. No, you were. I think I coughed somewhere right after super inclusive, non-alcoholic botanical
Yeah.
drinks.
So in our space, we're super inclusive. So while we package everything around, um, we package everything around experiential, right? So we are a farm
Yeah.
and we sell hundreds of products to some of the best restaurants in New York City. When you as a consumer come in, you can certainly buy some greens if you'd like, because we do offer them, but it's more experiential that you can visit the farm, see the farm, taste the farm through beverages, taste the farm through salads we
Gotcha.
offer,
So if
right?
I'm a foodie and I want to do something cool, I'm like a foodie wannabe, right?
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
experiment in my kitchen to try and make really cool stuff. So I could come down and do some sweet
Yes.
type of experimental for me gourmet type of meals. Do you give people a reason to do that? Like, hey, I want to do something cool, and you have like a recipe that you hand give them to
Well,
try and experience, or is that
it's much
not
broader than that. It's
what it
like,
is?
when you think about, when I say we grew hundreds of varieties at the same time in the room, right? Using the same
Yeah,
ingredient mix, using the same climate control. It's like for a chef
yeah,
or anyone who's food forward, even home chefs, right? Anyone who can recognize even a couple dozen of what we make, right?
yeah,
It's like a veritable playground, right? The fact that it's so available, and then it's just ridiculously delicious and vibrant, because when you grow something in a perfectly controlled climate to maximize every single attribute of the plant and the green, right?
yeah.
Its vibrancy is like nothing you've ever tasted before, right? You would taste basil and be
Yeah,
like,
so I'm
oh,
gonna get it. I'm
this,
gonna get basil, and it's gonna blow my
yeah, it's
mind.
gonna
Yeah,
blow
I
your
got you.
mind, or nasturtium or borage or anything that we have, right? It's just, and the reason why
Uh,
some of the fine dining chefs likes, because when they try and create complex flavors, right, with a lot of different ways and a lot of different methods, specialty leaves, like sorrel and like some other elements, can add some amazing complexity to it. But what you traditionally get isn't vibrant enough. It's not strong enough because it's almost dead by the time you've gotten it, right? When you get it from
yeah,
us,
yeah, or yeah,
literally a couple hours after it's harvested, and it's been grown to be nothing but the most nutritious, the most colorful, the most flavorful, the most vibrant, right? Because that's what it's basically been raised to be that. And then you take it and you put it on a plate and mix it in with whatever other flavors you want to create the dining experience that creates that wow factor for people who either see it and or taste it.
yeah.
There's no equal, right? There's just no equal.
It's
Uh,
one of the interesting business parts of this, the brilliant part of this, is like you're plopping this what should be or traditionally would have been this competitive uh, uh, business in the middle of like foodie central of like here I'm in Chattanooga, right? So
right.
there's
Okay.
area here where there's all the boutique, really nice restaurants and upscale type of stuff and really experimental and that type of thing would
Yeah.
be like this massive competition, but it's actually the source for the creation for
Right.
everything around you, right? I mean
Right.
that is brilliant. It's,
Yeah.
it's brilliant because those you would compete with are actually supporting you and you're supporting them. It's
Well,
fantastic. I love it.
when if you take a further step back and think about what it is that we grow, why is it that iceberg, romaine, and some of the other lettuces, right, are so ubiquitous, and the baby versions of those, or microgreens, right, which are more flavorful, more nutritious, right? Why are they so underpenetrated? And the answer is very simple. The stuff that we grow must be grown indoors because it's too delicate and fragile to be grown outdoors, right? And it can't be
Mm.
shipped long distances because it doesn't last long enough to be shipped long distance, right? And so what you have today in grocery stores and a lot of restaurants without us is you've got only the varieties that basically can last long enough over weeks of shipping to be usable by the time you get it in some way that makes people happy, right?
Well,
Um,
I can't even imagine what the costs. I mean, the logistical costs and the densification issues of shipping at long distance. It's fairly
you wouldn't,
expensive to just ride it across
yeah.
town on a bike. If you're going to densify it and try and ship it 500 miles, you'd lose your ass.
It's like,
Or
yeah.
it would be so expensive nobody could buy it, right?
No, it's like shipping air, right? Or shipping, glass.
Yeah,
Glassware, right?
yeah,
It's not something that one would tend to do. So therefore it's hard to get, and it's not everywhere because it's very hard to grow. A limited number of people do it, and it's very hard to ship. So only the stuff that's really, like hardy or can survive that kind of shipping actually gets shipped. So what we've done is we
yeah.
basically in Brooklyn, right outside of Manhattan, right, where arguably has one of the highest concentrations of restaurants globally and one of the highest concentrations of Michelin star and fine dining restaurants globally, although there are dozens of cities across the globe that would rival that, obviously. But what we've done is we've said,
Sure.
listen, we're right here, and chefs, we know you love this stuff and we know you can't get it. And we know you can't get it high quality. And all of that is true. And when they discover us, it's some of the most amazing stuff that they've ever had. But we're not in competition with almost
Right.
anyone
Right.
else because no one else. You have some greenhouses that are growing a couple of varieties and still have to ship it from a few hours away, right? But it's not. So we're basically trying to expand an underpenetrated, underrepresented, and underappreciated, highly nutritious, right, flavorful, dense microgreen that everyone talks about they want, whether it's for your smoothie, whether it's for your beverage, whether it's for your sandwich, whether it's for whatever, right? Um,
Mm.
we can offer it here. And if we can figure out a way to do these sort of culinary or micro farms or whatever you'd like to call it, and put a few dozen around New York, a few dozen around Chicago, a few dozen around DC, right? When you put it that way and make it accessible,
Yeah.
almost like a Starbucks, but not that way, but not in a coffee way, but in a different way, like a bodega, or a different way, like in terms of being able to access stuff that you can typically access on a super convenient basis, you will expand the market, right? And that is basically what
For
our
sure.
ultimate goal is, right? To be able to do that. But like I always say, you have to be around to do good over time, right? And these businesses
It
generally have, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead,
Oh,
please.
I was going to say
Please.
these when you get into these expensive type of vertical farming elements, the payback isn't 1, 2, or 3 years, right? The payback is more like 5, 7, 10 years, right? And so
Yeah.
you need to find a way to be self-sustaining and profitable over a period of time because it's hard to raise capital in a position where you can just sort of have that long timeline unless it's a family office or someone who's super invested in building this kind of legacy, right, or this kind of infrastructure. So
Yeah.
part of the philosophy, like I was saying before, is we marry the vertical farming with an experiential, consumer driven value proposition that allows us to break even and be profitable on the whole operation, right? So we can tread water with a life vest and be able to figure out how to grow and maximize what we've done because we're not constantly in a scramble trying to avoid losses or constantly in a scramble trying to raise capital just to be able to fund losses, right? I personally believe that I have four walls. I should be four wall break even or positive cash flow, right? At a minimum,
Mm.
right? Or else
Yeah.
the entire venture really isn't worth engaging in, right? Because what are we doing, right? And so that's the other
Yeah.
piece of the
Yeah.
philosophy.
Yeah. No, you're that's is the now, I mean, you mentioned the expansion, obviously, and that's obviously there. It's a silly question to ask because it obviously you could have a couple and you could have at least one in almost every town. But I mean, once you get down, there's some smaller towns I think of pretty close to where I live here in Chattanooga that they'd look at that and go, "What the heck is that?"
Right. Well,
It just
yeah,
wouldn't work. But Chattanooga would
yeah.
work.
Chet,
Chattanooga would
well,
absolutely work.
there are two,
And Ash, there's certain that you could get down to a small level town where this would absolutely kick butt, right? I mean, because the
well,
penetration is there in this type of market.
there are two ways to think about us, and most people think about us and our expansion in the way that you are, right? Where, they see
Yeah.
what we have and they see what we do today and they say, okay, that can be stamped out in some iteration in a wide
Oh,
variety of
sure.
places, big and small, right? Which is not untrue, right? You could, if it was only the chef business that we were focused on really driving revenue, and then the brewery and tap room, right, and events business, right? Then you're right. You can only have so many of these in any particular area because there's only so many restaurants to approach and so many things you could
Yeah,
do
but
that. And
still, but that market is still very, very large.
it's still very large, and we can still satisfy a large piece of it even with the farm that we have now, right?
Sure.
Given how margin our stuff is. But the way I think about growth is trying to elevate our imagination relative to, so what is the asset we really have, right? If I were to say to you, well, wouldn't it be cool if we created a version of our farm, right, that was smaller in terms of the number of racks, right? Wasn't focused on chefs at all. But if we were focused on combining a fast casual salad, like a sweet green just salad concept, with a bar, tap room, event space concept, right? And so I could literally grow all the salad greens I needed on site, harvest them before your eyes, put it in your bowl, make a great earthy, refreshing salad that is very different than sweet green just salad and any of the others, plus also have the ability to put some of that stuff into our brew lab operation and also have events because the space is so visually stunning, right? then you could say, wow, you could put 20 of those in New York, right? You could put 20 of those in Boston, right? You start to say, okay, that's a more consumer, high volume, retail,
Yeah.
vertically integrated driven business, right? And that's what we need to do with vertical farming, in my opinion. Get it to a small enough size where it's super high yield, super productive, where you can not sell the base commodity to someone else. You keep it yourself and you convert it into something that's highly coveted, high margin, high volume. And that's where we plan to make money on the vertical farming concept.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I was thinking that in my mind as well, but I was also thinking. I mean, the asset that you have, there's, for instance, there's a lot of businesses, particularly in like recycling, et cetera, and sustainability that
Yeah.
don't work at a super large scale, right?
Yes.
When we start talking about sustainability and those type of things, the smaller, more localized makes more sense, right?
Yeah.
Logistics tries to figure that out with like home delivery and saying, well, if we put the distribution centers close to the major metropolitan centers, then the distance to travel to deliver, to home is far less, and therefore it's more sustainable, which is complete BS because you're still
Yeah.
shipping it from Hong Kong.
Yeah. I mean,
Unless you're going to
yeah.
make that product right there too, which is what you're doing,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
does it make sense, or is this a solution that can be eventually taken it or extracted, or some form of it extracted to solve some of the issues that others are working towards, where they are trying to sell the product to other people, and like food deserts, et cetera, and that type of stuff? Or is that just, I mean, you get it, but that's just not the business model,
No, you
right?
you 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 can, right? There's a lot of things that need to happen before you can let me start off with this summary statement, then I'm gonna try and fill it in, right? There's a lot of things that you can
Yeah.
do once the technology is more ubiquitous, cost effective, more people are good at it,
Yeah.
right? People are accepting
Hmm.
of it,
Hmm.
and you figure out where it's utilized best, right? Um,
Right.
but before you do that, you've got to find a way to be sustainable to make money in a way that's not a charitable giving 501(c)(3) sort of operation, right? The struggle
Totally agree.
the struggle that
Totally agree.
sustainability has is the way it's been presented and marketed and the way it's unfolded over the past couple of decades is it's very much branded as something that you do on a volunteer basis, or it's got to be doing some kind of community good, or it's got to be going into a food desert, or it's got to be all these things that it just can't be
Hmm.
because it's
Yeah.
not sustainable yet, right? So that's number
Right.
one. Number two is when you really think about sustainability and you think about how you could make a maximum impact, people keep thinking about scale in the terms of the bigger I am in one place, the bigger impact I can have, right? The problem
Right.
is sustainability, when you really peel back all the layers of the onion and figure out what we're really talking about, sustainability is 100% an infrastructure play, right? You
Yes.
need
100%. Yep.
infrastructure in a lot of different, whether you're doing returnable containers, right? Whether you're trying to upcycle waste, whether you're trying to do all these things that people talk about, zero truck miles, right? It's an infrastructure question, and people keep confusing it with the fact that random businesses are supposed to come up with all the capital to be able to. It's like asking a private company to build the New York City subway system, or asking
Yeah.
a private company to build the entire logistics and supply chain for iceberg lettuce from the southwest of the U.S. to the northeast, right? That's
Right.
just not how that works, right? The infrastructure was built over decades with a lot of government support, with a lot of private capital support, but it's an infrastructure play, right? And so what we're talking about is we are trying to become the part of the plumbing of New York City relative to this
Right.
particular product, which can go to chefs, and finding a way as a plumbing, as a part of the plumbing to be super value added to consumers in a way that we are the only ones that can offer them this sense that they get when they come to us, which is what we do. But what you talk about, I'll pause in a second, Michael. When you talk about sustainability, there's so much wrapped into what people, when the car was invented, people called it the horseless buggy, right? If you always
Right.
thought about it as a horseless buggy, you never would have come up with all the stuff a car can do because it's a car and has nothing to do with being a horseless buggy, right? It's the same.
That's
It's right.
true.
It's the same thing. And
Yeah, you're
look at
right.
the big mass vertical farms. They had this new technology, this great stuff. What did they do? They just tried to recreate the business model of outdoor agriculture. Big places, right? A lot of stuff inside, high volume, massive scale, in my opinion, completely misuse the technology because you can't do
Yes,
that, right? This technology is best hyper local, super small, dozens of them, right? That's how you win in the
agreed.
last mile, right? And so when people start to think it, as people start to think of it that way more, you'll see more infrastructure like in New York or the big cities where as you do it and as you create a network of things that are profitable, then you start to put them in areas that are a little more challenged relative to healthy eating because what I'm doing is not going to solve a food desert problem, but it could be a part of it, right? If you want to
It
put
could
a,
be part. Well,
yeah, it could be a
yes, you're
part of
right.
it,
Well,
right?
improving your concept, you take your concept and tweak it a bit, and then you've got other solutions, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
planting a seed that can grow into other. And I totally agree with you 100%.
yeah.
I got
You
into
could,
recycling of plastics, et cetera, because it's logistics. You call it infrastructure, I call it logistics. I mean the
right?
exact same thing that you're talking about.
Yeah,
I agree with you
yeah,
100%. It is a
yeah,
infrastructure logistics play across the board, and it is. You're right. Stuck in the old paradigms. Why don't we take this and make it sustainable? No, no, no. We need to think of different ways to do it that are
yeah.
sustainable.
And
And
like,
in most instances, it is hyper localized
it's
that
got to be
makes it
hype.
that way.
It's got to, we talked to a grocery store chain that specializes in going into challenged areas, right? When other grocery stores pull out, they
Mm-hmm.
tend to go in, and they've been very successful at it. And they are launching a program where they put in a farm like ours as a centerpiece in their grocery store, right? Where they can harvest and provide it as product because they think it's important for people to see the benefits of it being there, see how fresh it is, but also get closer to
Mm-hmm.
technology. But a grocery store can do that kind of thing if they can figure out the format and the tech, and they take out all of the transportation, right, associated with it, right? Because there
Yes.
and the waste that you eliminate, the freshness you get. There's a lot of total cost benefits that go into it if you do the math right, as opposed to how much does that green cost me, right? And
Right.
folks like hotels, folks like grocery store chains, they're starting to understand the hyper localized nature of being able to do that. But if you were to do that, if every grocery store had an element of that and pick, 5 to 6 to 8 crops that are baby green, microgreen focused that are geared towards your particular populace. If you're in more of a Latin community, you can do flavors that way. If you're more in a New Orleans community, you can do stuff that's that way. If you're in Chattanooga, you do stuff that's that way. You can really start to hyper localize. You can't grow everything this way, but you don't have to grow everything this way. You just have to grow some
No,
things
you
this
don't.
way and do other stuff.
Yeah.
But once people think of it that way, the economics are actually there on a total cost basis.
Yeah, no, they really are, and it's interesting that I mean when you get into the different regionalities of what you would grow and how you do
Yeah,
those specific things, you can though get into the situation where you're growing things in areas where you never would. So
yeah,
let's just like let's just take somewhere even further north, and you get into the you know Canada, and you could be growing crops and on micro scales, obviously, like I'm talking about, that you wouldn't grow there, and you have to fly them in,
yeah,
right? So I mean, like
of course.
Vancouver, how much of the stuff in Vancouver is grown locally? Probably very little.
It's very little. I mean, and look, when you look around the globe, there are like the Netherlands or like Singapore
Right.
or like South Korea. There are people that are far ahead of where we are in the vertical farming and indoor farming overall
Sure.
sector, right? And
Sure.
there are places that are much closer to this where if you build the infrastructure, right, or the logistics backbone to be able to do this cost effectively locally, right? Turns out you can do it cost effectively locally, right? But you have to have a lot of constituencies lined up, right, to be able to make it sort of a reality and not have the burden fall on like a particular private company who's supposed to figure out how to do this and absorb all the losses until society is ready, right, to accept it. That's
Yeah.
that's not how progress is made on these kinds of things, right? So what you do, you Trojan horse it, you spend time, a little piece here, a little piece there, a little piece there. There's that old joke, right? How do you eat an elephant? Yeah, one bite at a time, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the way. If you don't,
Exactly.
if you never start, you never finish, right? So we consider
Yep.
ourselves at the starting point, right? And 5, 10, 20 years, we'll look back and we'll be, surrounded by, who knows how expansive it will be. It'll be far bigger than it is today. It'll be far more top of mind for everyone. You'll see us in places that we have a failure to imagine today, but when you look at it 10 years from now, it would have been obvious that why wasn't that there the whole time, right? These kinds of things. But if we're not around long enough, if we don't build enough of a brand, and if we don't communicate with enough people, that's why the consumer side is so important. Even though we're not selling greens to them on a high volume basis, we're selling specialty greens to restaurants. We get 1,000 people a week that come into our space to drink, do an event, to hang out, to do. We have a study hall, which is sort of this co-working space we do 4 days a week. We're library quiet with no music. People can come in and just sort of work. Right. We
Yeah,
basically
I saw that on your
expose
website.
ourselves.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. That's
Yeah,
very interesting
we
concept.
expose ourselves to the community, to as many people as possible, because it turns out for people to appreciate something like this, like sustainability driven indoor vertical farming in downtown Brooklyn, right outside of Manhattan, it doesn't mean people have to buy the greens. You definitely can't communicate with them by selling greens on a grocery store shelf that you've grown indoors 100
No,
miles away,
no,
right?
you
There's
can't.
just no communication. And so we basically
Yeah.
own the last mile to the consumer. We're the ones building the brand. We're the ones in front of them. We're showing them cool ways to use this stuff, right? Not just um, buy an expensive salad mix from us, right? That's not what we're asking people to do, because that is not sustainable in the financial feasibility sense of the word.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely brilliant. I love that aspect of it too, and I wanted to dig into that a little bit. And so,
Yeah,
thank you for bringing that in there, because it is absolutely the best marketing that you could do,
yeah,
because it's long term sustainable marketing as well. The interesting part about this, like you talk about, is like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? How do you boil a frog? You throw them in cold water,
right,
all that type of stuff, right?
right.
Right. And we can't expect big business. It's the entrepreneur. It's Derek Pitts. It's the Mike Vincents. It's those. This the blue ocean of opportunity with
Right.
sustainability is enormous. The economic and impacts, the uplifting of people's lives through this is just
Yeah.
tremendous on a capitalistic capitalistic manners. We both agree. 501c and trying to run this type of stuff and try and
Mm.
improve the world through these type of ventures and that type of thing, through altruism, ain't gonna get it.
Doesn't
Human
do it.
altruism is
Hmm.
is fleeting at best.
Right.
It's like a dog chasing a rabbit and sees a squirrel. It's all over the darn place. It just doesn't work. It needs to be a business that is sustained. Do you feel that like mandates and the hijacking of sustainability as an ideology, it sets us back a little bit in your dig into your mind a little bit, as your philosophy on it as a whole, because I love where you're coming from. I
Yeah.
absolutely love how you're doing this, and the way you think through this. And I contend the more we can get people to think like you are and like I do and many others do, but more and more people to understand that sustainability is business 101, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
really is business 101. The more advancements we can make, and the better off we'll be.
I would I would say, listen, there are so many, every effort at doing something like this across the broad spectrum of how you and I would define sustain alt proteins, vertical farming, kelp farming,
Yeah.
all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
Loaded with people with the right intentions and good intentions, right? Um,
Exactly. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and how you can approach some of the stuff really depends on whether you accept how the cards are dealt to you or not, right? Which is sort of hasn't been my history necessarily, right? You try and I like to say, we try and control our own destiny, right? Relative to, we should own the consumer because we can control our destiny. We shouldn't get to the consumer through someone else because we don't control our own destiny, right? But when you think
Yeah.
about all the people that are trying to do this, and trying to do it, it's at some point, at one point, sort of combining the concept of sustainability with, I'm trying to do good, right? And people will follow me because the effort of doing good is good enough, even if it requires a lot of change on the consumer part from what they're accustomed to, right? There
Hmm.
was a belief that that's how that
Hmm.
was going to move the sustainability right forward. Turns out, as we've always known, humans hate change, right? It's not what they're going to do. And just doing a
Strange.
sustainability, if you're doing it that doesn't taste as good or not as well, or it's more expensive, all those things, well, the world has spoken. No one's following you, right? Because that's just not how that's going to work. So, and then when you look at the system that, a lot of people chase grant money, or a lot of these sustainable driven funds or family offices, right? Will put 50,000 here, 50,000 there, 50 there, right? They're so diluted, and they spread it around so much with so many small dollar amounts to a lot of different places, right? No one has ever given enough grease for the wheels, right, to get real momentum. It's spread out too
Right.
far. And this isn't the VC business, right? VCs is the lottery ticket business, right? You put money everywhere.
Yep.
You completely blanket a certain vertical because you don't know who's going to win or who's going to lose. But if you don't buy a ticket, you never win, right? And so, but
Right.
that's and so you get 99 that don't pay off, one pays off, and it's great. The sustainability side just needs a longer road, and so it attracts more of the legacy building sort of charity minded type of mindset as opposed to the profit motive
Hmm.
mindset. But there's never enough to really I think sometimes if a lot of these organizations put a bunch of money behind one or two concept that they really believe in and gives enough power to get over the hump, the impact you could make in 5 years versus the way they're trying to accomplish it now, which is so diluted and spread out, it would be massive. It would be amazing, right? And so I think there should be or could be, and I think there will be an evolution of how people approach what it means to create impact. Impact is results, right? And for people to have results, you got to be around, you got to give something to people that they want and they want to pay for, and you have to be able to sustainably do it over a long period of time, right?
Yeah.
That's impact, right? A lot of people think they're making impact by investing in these different pieces, but you can't get enough traction. And so I wouldn't say it set us back in terms of the way you said it earlier, because it's always moving forward. It's like, am I hiking through quicksand with a heavy backpack, right? Or am I on a hoverboard floating on flat ground feeling good, right? It's there's a lot more of the quicksand and the heavy sand and the hard take of steps
Yeah.
right now,
So we're not
but
set back at you. We're just dredging
it's
through a bit.
just
Yeah.
slow and dredgy, and is a lot of like there's a lot of effort without the best ROI on every hour put in, right? We have to find
Yeah.
ways to make it to reduce the friction so people can so the
Does
flywheel can just start to move.
does this bring us to DK Bell Holding Company? Is that the
Yeah.
philosophy behind that?
DK Bell Holding Bunny is basically, my career has been in finance, right?
Yeah. Right.
And the last 22 years it was in a investment banking, but a particular corner of investment banking called restructuring, so turnarounds, right? And dealing with
Yeah.
distressed companies and trying to reorganize them and help them find paths to glory and new strategies and preserving jobs and value. I retired from that, and I set up my own small family office, right, which is what DK Bell is, right? And then when I was
Hmm.
looking for, as a lot of people do at this stage, right, when they're moving from one career to another, and they have the ability to be able to decide what they're going to invest in and how they're going to spend their time, I wanted to do something that my kids would talk about. I wanted to do something that people got excited about. I wanted to do something that at least felt like would be moving the ball forward in my own tiny part of the universe, right? I'm not saving the world, I'm not doing
Right.
all this stuff, but you can't complete a puzzle without every single piece, right? And so,
That's right.
you know, I'm not trying to do the whole puzzle. I'm a piece, and maybe I'm two or three pieces, and someone else will be four or five pieces. And if enough people get together, we've got a puzzle, right? So I'm just trying to do my piece, and I felt that I got involved in Farm.One. It had it it was a great brand. Started in 2016, got crushed by COVID, right? Had to shut down for a long period of time. I found the brand, came along since I'm
Mm.
an expert at turnaround and restructure. I had an idea, a vision, a strategy for it. I revived it, co-founded the reiteration of it, after it was shut down for about a year. And this is what we're doing, right? And creating this interesting consumer oriented but chef focused mix of this technology, but trying to do it in a way that provides value to people across the full spectrum where there's a fair exchange, right? We can get enough economics to be able to give people what they want and grow the business and further the technology and try and make every step to the end game closer that we can, knowing it's a very, very long walk. And people enjoy the ride, see where we're trying to go, want to support it. And I tell them, support us. They don't, a lot of these places say, support my vertical farm, buy my salad mix off the grocery store shelf, and that's the only way you can contribute, right? We're like,
Mm.
how about you come and hang out in our space for study hall and study for a couple hours and maybe buy a coffee? How about you buy a non-alcoholic beer at our place that we brewed with stuff from the farm? How about you throw a birthday party here around the farm? You know, helps us get economics. You get a great venue that is like no other basically in the world. And, you know, we get to provide a value exchange that allows us to keep furthering our technology, right? There are like a dozen different ways that people can engage with what we call sustainability, right? We haven't been so prescriptive that it is so narrow that people just can't do it enough to get the flywheel moving. We have opened it up and try to do it in a way where we provide a number of different things. They all hang together strategically because there's a method to the madness, obviously, but it
Hmm.
provides a portfolio effect of the way people can engage and support what we want to do, which should, in theory, allow us to advance the ball much further than we could otherwise.
It's awesome. So when is or can you talk about when is the plan to expand, or are you there already? Are you looking to franchise or corporate owned expansion, slow, steady? What's the ideas there?
I think usually I think time has borne out that, you know, the first few formats or the first few ideas you have about expansion, it's best to be company owned, right? And figure it out.
Yeah.
Get a few
Yeah.
prototypes out there, get it done, and then once you've
Right.
really got it nailed, then you know how the information transfer goes, how people get trained, can people learn how to do this stuff with the quality standards you want, all the stuff that company
Mm,
owned, going to franchise do. And I'm not talking
yeah.
about a playbook that hasn't done. There's ridiculous amounts of success with this playbook, but we intend to follow the same playbook, right? And so
Gotcha.
we're out raising capital now, right, to try and raise enough funds to do the first like five prototype locations in the way that I talked about, the combining sort of the fast casual salad with the brew lab, with the vertical farm,
Yeah.
with the events thing, to get several prototypes built in Manhattan, perhaps even a Manhattan flagship similar to what we have in Brooklyn, right? And then just to see how that sets, how that settles, right? There's a growth plan, I think, to at least 15, perhaps 20 of these locations in NYC, and then we have a mapping of what you could do in cities beyond that. But I think
Gotcha.
that with that combination, and so it's also a profitable way to grow because the units we're talking about are always engineered to be cash flow positive, right? Because that's just how
Yeah.
you engineer these things. Because that's if you can build it, that's how you build it. You put them in the right place, you sell the right product, and you know, fast casual salads, brewery tap rooms, cocktail bars, small intimate event spaces, uh, those are all playbooks that have dozens of different successful elements to it, right? And it's very hard to do
Hmm.
one of those things that doesn't work, right? Because you just engineer it in a way that does. And so that's our plan to be able to engineer each unit in the way that uh, basically turns off a lot of cash, right, for a lot of turnover, a lot of revenue, and then we can just keep rolling that into new units. But it's almost like self-funding our own growth by creating something that generates a lot of cash, as opposed to going for massive size scale and then trying to run on the hamster wheel to get big enough, right, where I might be able to generate a rate of return. I think that of course, said every entrepreneur ever, right, Michael? I think my
Yeah.
method actually has a lot of, you know, a lot of credibility to it, you know. So
No, I, I
yeah,
I I have the same business philosophy
yeah,
that you do. I think it's responsible growth, and I think it makes
yeah.
it makes a lot of sense. Do you have? Because I want to let you get back to your vacation. I'm sure you want to get back to your
No
vacation. I
problem. Yeah.
appreciate the time. So we've talked about a lot of things, and people can glean a lot of information, especially those that are like you said, like I just went through it, and I'm still at the building it stage, right? I'm
Yep.
still waiting for my 7 years to become an overnight success as I change from one from one from one career to another. I've completely
Yeah.
done it about face, but and in a similar, we could talk some other time about that. This isn't about me. Somebody who's in a similar place going, look, I want to do something that's legacy that helps, that maybe my kids can see and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and has do you have general, I mean, the talk you just gave has all kinds of just nuggets of
Yeah.
gold all over it, and I appreciate that. But can you summarize it, or
Yeah.
or give a, hey, do this, or look, I made these mistakes, don't do these, think this way instead of that way, or whatever your advice would be.
Yeah. What I generally say, and it's interesting, I've done a handful of these type of discussions or panel discussions at sort of sustainability groups at different colleges or something. And I think I generally am saying things that people don't expect to hear in that environment, right? But
Hmm.
then
Yeah.
they realize it's almost like a splash of cold water to the face, because my view is, look, if your heart is in the right place and you're bent on doing something that is sustainability driven, that's great, because that's what we need, right? We need the heart and the passion. But that ain't enough. People aren't going to follow heart and passion. Consumers, businesses aren't going to give you money and give you revenue because of heart and passion. You actually have to give them something that adds value. And if you're trying
Mm.
to provide an alternative to something that exists today, or extend something that exists today into a new area, or like what we're doing, the stuff exists. It's just really hard to get, right? Because it's not made in the way, in the place it needs to be the most value. So let's do it in the way and in the place where it can get the most value, right? It's very profit driven. It's business. Sometimes when people think about doing something sustainability, corporate and profits are like just dirty words, right? That's like the enemy.
Yeah.
It's like all that stuff. But you know what? Profit is what makes the world go around, and it's profit that funds all the stuff that when you want to do something good in a charitable way, or contribution, or help uplift communities that need it, right? That comes from profits, right? Someone who's giving that money made that money doing something somewhere. And so when you're going to get into sustainability, I always tell people, you've got to have a version of your plan, your model, that in a reasonably short order can make money. And why do I feel confident saying that? Because just engineer it so it makes money, right? Too
Right.
often people just run out of the gate, run down the path, do something sustainability. People will follow me because I'm doing good. And they turn around over the shoulder and no one's there, right? Because that's not how it's actually going to work. But if you give them something they love, if you give them something they covet, and then when they want that feeling again, if you're the only one providing it, that's the path to glory, right? That's how you get there. And people experience that in all kinds of things that they engage with today, both sustainably driven and non-sustainably driven. If you can give them a sustainability driven version of it, you will win, right? You just will,
Right.
because it's you winning like every other business over the history of time has won. You're just doing it better, giving people what they want, and they keep coming to you to get it, right? And so I find that there's a massive disconnect generally when people are thinking about doing some sustainably driven from that element of it. It's like it's different, or I'm not going to go there, I'm not going to do that. But it's actually one of the best paths to success to make sure you have that mindset and engineer your sustainability effort to be able to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time today,
Yeah.
Derek. It's just I'm glad I cram
Yeah.
I, in full disclosure, I was looking for nurseries um, for to discuss my business with them and what I can offer them through my recycling
Interesting.
business.
Yeah.
And I came across Farm.One, and I saw, oh, vertical farming, et cetera. And I'm like, okay, cool. This could fit into my sustainability
Yeah.
podcast, and reached out. And thank you so much
Yeah.
for taking the time with us. I really love what you do. Farm.One, right?
Farm.One. That's
Or
right. Farm.One.
check out Derek Pitts on LinkedIn. You can grab
Yep.
him there too. He's got all this information there, and
All there.
it's inspirational and very cool stuff. Thank you so much for your accessibility, my friend, and I hope you have a fantastic vacation.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for finding us.
You got it, my friend. Everybody, thank you for downloading and listening to Sustainability, or the Sustainaics. Sorry about that. And we'll catch you next time. Peace and love. Everybody.